Chazon Yeshayahu, this week's Haftora is a very famous Haftora. There's a story told by Rabbi Raskin, which is a parable, that he says that on Shabbos, Chazon, on this Shabbos, the word Chazon means to see. God shows every Jew the third holy temple. We know that the third holy temple is already built and will come down from heaven when we are ready. And so on this Shabbos, God shows every Jew the third holy temple. The word Chazon is like Aramaic. In other words, the vision is not that clear. It's not re'eh, to see, but rather Chazon, which is more from the distance. If we look very hard and we close our eyes and we focus in a soul vision, we have the possibility of seeing this third holy temple. And Rabbi Raskin goes on to say that it's similar to a father who bought his child a beautiful suit. And Shabbos morning he comes to shul, and while the Balkorah is reading the Torah, like the children do, they run outside to play on the monkey bars, and he fell down and he tore his suit. He comes running in to the shul crying, "Tati, Tati, Daddy, I tore my suit." And the father says, "Don't worry, my dear son, I love you, I'll get you another suit." And that's what happened. That week he went out and he bought his child a more beautiful suit than the week before. And the next Shabbos again, the son runs out, and again he plays on the merry-go-round, and he tears his suit again. Comes back in, "Tati, Daddy, I'm so sorry, I tore my suit." And the father says, "Don't worry, my dear child, I'll get you a third suit." And that week he went to a tailor and made him up a gorgeous suit, better material, nicer and more expensive. And he came to Shabbos, and the son said, "Tati, can I have my suit?" And his father said, "Nope, I'm not going to give it to you." He says, "Why not?" "Well, I gave you the first suit and you tore it. I gave you the second suit and you tore it. Now, I'm not going to give it to you. I prepared it. It's in the closet. When I see you change your ways and you become mature and you behave, I will give you the suit." And every once in a while, the father would open the closet and take out the suit and show the child the suit and remind him, "When you're ready, the suit is here for you." And so says Rabbi Yitzchak, God gave us the first suit, the first holy temple. And we misbehaved, we sinned with three major sins: idolatry, adultery, and murder. And because of this, we tore our first suit, we destroyed our own holy temple. God gave us another holy temple. And again, we destroyed the second temple. We misbehaved. We didn't treat our brothers and sisters with the proper love and respect. Sinas chinam, unwarranted hatred. And we tore the second suit. We destroyed the second holy temple. God says, "Look, I'll make you a third one." Oh, we're so excited. No, where is it? God says, "Look, when I see that you truly love your brothers and sisters unconditionally, and you do for one another, and you care for one another with love and affection, I will give you your third holy temple." And every once in a while, on Shabbos Chazon, this Shabbos, God takes out this beautiful temple, which is more expensive and nicer and more beautiful and fancier and everlasting, and reminds us, look, it's ready to come down. It's ready to come down from heaven. It's ready to descend onto the Temple Mount. It's going to happen with the blink of an eye. Yeshuas Hashem keheref ayin. All you got to do is blink. But you got to be ready. And we have to do our own. Each one of us has to participate. Each one of us has to do our mitzvah to bring about the ultimate geula. As the Rambam tells us that one should always view the world on a scale of 50% good and 50% bad. One mitzvah can truly bring the entire world to salvation. So that is the opening pasuk of this week's Haftora of Chazon Yeshayahu. But even though Yeshaya speaks about redemption, this chapter happens to be a very, very harsh chapter. It's about reprimand. And he goes on to say, "Shimu shemayim v'azini eretz." Hear, O heaven, and listen, O earth. It's interesting to note, when it comes to shemayim, when it comes to heaven, he says shimu. When it comes to eretz, he says hazini. What's the difference? we find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he spoke to the Jewish people, he said the reverse. Hazinu Hashemayim v'adabeira v'sishma ha'aretz imnefi. Moses said, Hazinu for the heavens. And he said, Shimu for the earth. Why? Because Moses was close to the heaven and he was far from the earth. In contrast to Yeshaya Hanavi, who was distant from heaven and close to the earth. In other words, this is part of the reprimand. That he tells the Jewish people, you guys, you're far from heaven and you're close to earth. What's important to you is earthly things, is earthly riches. What makes you happy are material things. In contrast to what should make you happy is to do another mitzvah, to acquire more Torah knowledge, to light the Shabbos candles, to put on the tefillin, that should make you happy. And God forbid, if you miss out the opportunity to do a mitzvah, that should make you sad. In contrast, we are so entrenched within the physical and the material that what makes us happy is money. What makes us sad, God forbid, is the opposite. And therefore, this is part of the Chazon Yeshayahu, this is part of the reprimand of Isaiah to the Jewish people. He goes on to say in verse number 4, he tells us that Hoi Goy Choite, says, woe, O sinful nation, Am Keved Avoin, a people that is weighed down by iniquity. There is a beautiful teaching of Rabbi Raskin, who says, and we know that Rabbi Raskin was a lover of Jews, and he says that what is the meaning of these words over here in the Haftora, Am Keved Avoin, which we normally translate a people that are weighed down by iniquity, says that Rabbi Raskin that the mere fact that we think about iniquity, already the thought of sin is heavy, that we don't want to sin, that the essence of every Jew is so close to God, and the essence of every Jew wants to be with God, that the moment we think about sin, already we feel the heaviness. Furthermore, we go on to say in pasuk number 15, when you spread out your hands to give tzedakah, you don't have empathy. This is a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, and a response to why is it when you spread out your hands in prayer, God says, I will not answer you, and your hands are filled with blood. Says the Baal Shem Tov that even though you spread out your hands to give tzedakah to the poor, but you lack empathy. It's not enough that you do it robotically and you give the poor person money, but you have to feel their pain. If it's your son, if it's your daughter, if it's your brother and your sister, it would bother you. And therefore a person comes in to your office, you got to give a kri-ksiv. They tell a story that the Rebbe Rashab and his brother, the Razah, used to play Rebbe and Chassid. And one day the Rebbe Rashab came to his older brother, the Razah, and he told him about a problem he had. He did something spiritually wrong. He was asking the Razah for some type of tshuva, some type of tikkun. And the Razah thought about it for a moment, and he gave him an answer what he should do to fix his spiritual iniquity. And then the Rashab said to him, you should know, you're not a Rebbe. He says, why not? He says, when a chassid comes to a Rebbe, and he tells the Rebbe, I have a problem, I have a sin, the Rebbe gives a kri-ksiv, oy vey. The Rebbe feels the pain. You didn't feel my pain. You listened, and you gave me an answer. There was no kri-ksiv. You can't be a Rebbe. And so says the Baal Shem Tov that even if you give tzedakah, and even though you take care of the poor, if you lack that kri-ksiv, if you lack that feeling, then you're not a Rebbe. If that's the case, God says, I'm not listening to your prayers. You want me to feel your pain? You have to feel the pain of the others. And that's why he goes on to say that your hands are filled with blood. The hands, the right hand and the left hand, represents our emotions. The hands are connected to the heart. The right hand represents ahava, love, and the left hand represents yira, which is awe of God. And the same is true, we lack this love and this awe of our brothers and sisters. And that's why our hands are filled with blood, rather than the emotions of those that are less gifted than us. Shabbos Chazon reminds us of all these things, that we have to be heavy when we think about sin, and we have to have feeling and concern about our brothers and sisters. And this is what we say in the Shema every day. These are the words that I, God, says, I give you today. That every day the Torah has to be brand new. It has to be exciting. Your excitement needs to be in the Torah. Every day you daven, it's like the brand new davening. Every day you put on tefillin, it's the first day you put on tefillin. Every day you give tzedakah, it's like the first opportunity you have to give charity. Every day you can make a bracha on food, it's like the first bracha you made. That is the way a yid has to live. If you live that way, then everything you do is with excitement. Everything you do is with empathy. Everything you do is inspiration. The prophet continues, in the end of days, God says, you should know. In verse number 26, and 26 also is the gematria of God's holy name, the Shem Havaya. God says, Vashiva shevtayich kivarishena v'yatzayich kivatchila. Says Almighty God, then in the future I will return your judges as at first, and your lawyers, your counselors, kivatchila, as in the beginning. What does that mean? And furthermore, how does this contrast with the portion of Shoftim v'Shoitim Titin L'cha B'chol Shorecha? God says, you shall place judges and policemen upon all your gates. In the Torah, it talks about policemen and sheriffs. Here in the Haftora, which comes later, God says, I will return your judges, and instead of saying policemen, it says your lawyers and your counselors and your coaches. What's the difference? And furthermore, verse number 26, when it comes to Sheftayich, your judges, he uses the word kavirishena, which means as it was at first. When it comes to your yatzayich, when it comes to your counselors, it says kivatchila, as it was in the beginning. And the Rebbe has a beautiful talk over here, and he says that generally a judge is separate from the person. It's on a higher level. The plaintiff, the defendant, is on a different level than the judge. Your yatzayich, the lawyers, your coaches, are generally your friends. They're coming to advise you. They're on the same level. And therefore, when Mashiach comes, in the days of Mashiach, number one, God will restore the judges as in the days of old, at first. The word in Hebrew, kivirishena, at first, is like a book. When you have a book, you have the introduction, and then you have chapter 1. So the word kivirishena is like the introduction. It's above the book. It's outside the book. It's connected to the book, but it's not chapter 1 yet. It's not into the book. Similar to the judge who's above you, even though he is close to you, but there's still a separation. And then you have your yatzayich, which are the counselors. They're like already chapter 1. They're connected to the book. They're connected to you personally. When Mashiach will come, we have the judges, which means the rebbes, the rosh hashivas, the rabbis who will teach Torah. And then you will have your friends, your yatzayich, who will help you to internalize the Torah and make it personal. There'll be no need for any police. There'll be no need for any sheriffs, because we're going to be living Torah. We're going to be living the law. As the Rebbe spoke many times, and he spoke to the mayors and governors of New York City years ago, and he said to them that you should know that the way to handle crime is not by putting more police on the street. That's not the way you're going to handle crime. Of course you need police on the street, but that's not the way you're going to change crime. Because people think, I have to outsmart the police. The smarter I get, the more crime I can do. You have to teach them the importance of being good. You got to teach them the 7 Noahide laws. And we got to start with the mother to a child, the father to a son, the mother to a daughter, when they're very, very young. And in school, they have to teach ethics and values. It's not enough in school that they teach math and science and history. But schools also need to teach ethics to the children. And that's the way we're going to change crime. That's the way we're going to fix crime. That's the way we're going to bring an end to crime. Unfortunately, right now, we do need police, and we have to fund the police. At the same time, but the way to change the paradigm is by teaching and educating the importance of God, that there's a God in the world, there's an eye that sees, there's an ear that hears. And by doing that, by establishing the judges, the teachers, as they were at first, and creating counselors, good friends, who will inspire us and make Torah and God real and personable, then there'll be no reason for any police and no reason for any sheriffs, because we will all be aligned with God and Torah. There's also the importance, as the Rebbe has spoken, Aseh Lecha Rav, that each one of us needs to make ourselves a teacher, a Rav. And of course, we have a rabbi of the synagogue, etc., etc. But you need to have a personal Rav. That could be a rabbi of the synagogue. But before you do things, and you have doubts, and you have dilemmas, always talk it over with someone who perhaps is a little older than you, or someone a bit smarter than you, or someone who you respect, and to listen to their advice. And that's the way you make Torah personable. I remember speaking to someone a number of years ago. He was a caterer, and it was before Passover, and he had a lot of different hotels he was working with. I was talking to him, I said, how you doing? He said, I'll tell you the truth, I'm very stressed out. I said, why are you so stressed out? Because I have so many hotels, I don't know what to do, I can't be in more than one place at once. I said, why don't you hire good managers, let them run, the different events. He says, yeah, but I don't know how to do that, I don't really know how to manage all these things. I said, why don't you get yourself a personal coach to help you work these things out? He says, is that Jewish, to get a coach? I said, let me tell you something. It's ethics of our fathers. It's Pirkei Avos. Aseh Lecha Rav, make yourself a coach. In ethics of our fathers, it's called a Rav. It's called a teacher. Today, we call it a coach. It's the same idea. And the Rebbe told us, in our generation, we have to make sure we make ourselves a coach. We got to have a rabbi. Even a rabbi has to have a rabbi. Even a coach needs a coach. We all need someone to help us and to instruct us and to give us comprehension and direction. So this is the idea of that to have for yourself judges and to have for yourself counselors. And furthermore, the idea of judges also represents to accept the Torah unconditionally. When the judge says something, you don't always like it. When your Rebbe says something or your teacher says something, you don't always like it. But then you talk it over with a friend. In other words, you internalize it, you learn it over, you chew it over, you meditate upon it, and then it becomes more personal. So this is the idea of how we conclude the Haftora, that by studying more Torah and by making Torah personal, then we have the ability to transform the Golus. Then we have this paradigm shift to bring about Geula. And finally we have the last verse, a verse that we speak about throughout the entire 3 weeks. And that is verse number 27, which is also the word Zoch, which means pure. And that is Tzion b'mishpat tipodeh v'shaveh b'tzdaka. Zion shall be redeemed with justice, and her returnees with righteousness. Tzion generally means Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, but yet it's called Tzion because Jerusalem has two names. One is Yerushalayim, and then it has another name, which is called Tzion. Tzion means a signpost. It means a marker. It represents the most innermost kernel of the heart. When a person instinctively knows God exists, instinctively they know what is correct. That is Tzion. And that is what the Haftora is teaching us here, that through the giving of tzedakah, and through the studying of Torah, and primarily the laws of the building of the temple, Hilchos Beis HaBechira and the Rambam, and the tractate of Tamid and Midos, and similarly to learn the laws of Geula, of redemption in the Rambam, and in the Gemara, and in the teachings of Chassidus, this brings us to a revelation that we reveal our tzion, we reveal the most inner part of our heart, and becomes real, and we become sensitive to people. And through giving tzedakah, tzedakah brings the geula. What does that mean? It not only brings the general redemption, it also brings the personal redemption. Our godly soul is encaged in the physical body. Our godly soul is encaged in our animal soul. And by giving tzedakah, by giving charity, we are redeemed. It allows the godly soul to leave the animal soul. There's a famous story told that there was two camels, a mother camel and a baby camel. And the baby camel turns to her mother and says, "Mom, how come we have these big eyelashes, these funny-looking eyelashes?" She says, "Why do you have these big eyelashes?" "We walk in the Sahara Desert, and there's a sandstorm. We have these big eyelashes to protect ourselves from the sand." "Oh, Ma, I understand. And why, Ma, do we have these ugly big humps? Why do we have these disgusting giant humps? We look hunchbacked." "Oh, these humps. When we travel in the desert, we can travel for days without drinking or eating, because these humps provide us with water and sustenance." "Aha. And Ma, how come we have these ugly feet, these big giant feet, these funny-looking feet?" "Oh, these feet were made when we walk on the hot sand to be able to give us stability. That's why we have these big ugly feet." "Aha, I get it, Ma. So you're telling me we have the eyelashes for the sand, and we have these humps for the long distance, and we have these big ugly feet for the sand to walk in the desert for miles and miles. So Ma, how come we're sitting in a cage in the Bronx Zoo?" And this is the point. This is the point, my dear friends. We're in Golus. We're in Golus. We're in the Bronx Zoo. We're encaged. We're supposed to be a light unto the nations of the world. We're supposed to be the chosen of all nations. And yet we're living like all the nations. We're no different than all the nations. How do we leave the cage? How do we leave the animal soul? And so the Haftora and Isaiah the prophet gives us the remedy and says, "Tzion b'mishpat tipada." If you want to redeem the innermost part of your heart, if you want to redeem the godly soul, then the way to do this is through the study of Torah, and primarily the study of Chassidus, and through the giving of charity, every day to give charity. As the Rambam tells us, you can give once a year a big check for $1 million, and the shul will appreciate it very, very much, and $2 million is even better. But it's important that every single day you give tzedakah. Every day. Even $1, even a quarter, even a dime, every day, and 2-3 times a day. Because the Rambam says, every time you give tzedakah, you're doing another mitzvah. So every day by giving tzedakah, you're protecting yourself. Every day by giving tzedakah, Hashem brings you salvation. So yes, once a year you make the big check to the shul, but every day you also need to give tzedakah. And by doing this, we are sure that Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah, that this will be the last year of exile, and the first year of the ultimate geula, with the coming of Mashiach, b'mheira b'yameinu, amen.